Long days, pleasant nights, and welcome to Kingslingers, a Doof Media podcast journeying through Stephen King's Dark Tower series and beyond. I am your host, Constant Reader Scott Daly, and joining me, as always, is the big boy himself. It's Matt Freeman. How's it going today, Matt?
Just hopping down the beach, having a merry old time.
Yeah, don't worry about the rip. It's
playing
good.
with. Yep, it's just a little rip. Just a little rip. Don't worry.
This week, our 8-part series covering Stephen King's Duma Key continues with part 4. We'll be chatting about how to draw a picture 6 all the way through how to draw a picture 7. In the wake of his magic painting recovery, Wireman steps up to help Edgar plan his fast approaching big night. To do this, he enlists a powerful ally, PAM. Also, we finally learned the story of Elizabeth's drowned twin sisters and the big boy that chased them into the water. Matt, what did you think of this week's reading?
Lots of great stuff. I think the phrase I'm going to say like 500 times this episode is that we're setting the table. As we will see, we're going to sort of touch base with a bunch of our different characters, and nothing particularly dramatic or shocking is going to happen, but we're gonna check in with everybody, and there's some wonderful happy scenes, which probably means this book is just going to get happier and happier and happier.
Yeah. No, definitely.
Yeah.
You mentioned the table, and it's definitely not leaking.
It's not leaking. It's not that the table is leaking. We're setting the table. That's a completely different. I don't even know what you're talking about. And now in there is this really fun scene where he gives the lecture that he's been dreading, absolutely dreading. That's a really fantastic scene. I love that scene too, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just kind of blown away by how much I'm enjoying this book this time. And it's not like I didn't enjoy it the first time. Obviously, I loved this book the first time I read it. That's why I picked it. But like, I'm just like constantly just like, hell yeah, as I'm turning these pages. Like, it just, everything like excites me and makes me happy, and it's just like, it's been an absolute joy to read this book so far. It's been great, like so much so that I opened my Twitter app, which I don't do that anymore. Actually, I do it all the time, but I don't normally like actually tweet from it. But I did because I was liking this book so much, and I needed to say something.
Yeah, it was a really strange tweet because you were just expressing like earnest enjoyment of something, which is not really what Twitter is for.
Oh, fuck, did I do it wrong again? I'm so sorry.
I mean, I gave you a like anyway, but you didn't insult anyone.
Should I be snarky? Let me just do a quick snarky tweet about Dune 2.
Yeah,
even though I haven't seen it.
What you should do is you should reply directly to Stephen King with something like kind of shitty and mean.
Oh yeah, that's what this app is for.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. I'll get right on that.
Okay.
Let me see what. This is great audio. Let me see what he said recently.
Oh, you're gonna love this. His last tweet was great, actually.
Oh yeah. Ka is a wheel. It always comes around to the same place again. Pretty mid post, Stephen. All right. There we go. Let's go ahead and get into it, Matt. I don't even know how we got off on that topic, but before we did, we haven't bugged the people about the merch shop in a month or so, and I feel like we need to do that. So, reminder, folks, we have a merch shop where we have all kinds of merchandise, especially merchandise for Kingslingers and related Dark Tower paraphernalia. I think we've added some stuff since we first opened the shop too, and we're going to be adding stuff regularly. So please go check back. Go to what's the
it's doofmedia.myshopify.com.
Thank you. You're so on it. There's a whole bunch of cool stuff there. I'm rocking the phone case for my phone right now, the open door phone case. It's really cool. I did discover a small problem with it though, Matt.
What's that?
Which is I use one of those wireless charging things that's at an angle. And the phone case makes my phone too heavy for the magnet that holds it on to the wireless charging thing. So I have to take my phone case off every night. But this is a testament to how much I love this phone case, is I'm doing that, and I put it on again every morning, which is a lot of work.
That means that it's actually good.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So there's that. There's a bunch of other cool stuff. There's shirts. There's mugs. I have like 10 Kingslingers mugs now. It's really getting out of hand. My wife is like, stop it. Stop with the mugs. But
there's stickers. There's notebooks. There's the mugs are good. The mugs are a bestseller, I think I dare say.
yeah, the Podcast Me mug is our bestseller by far,
Yep.
which makes me so happy because it's such a dumb it's such a dumb mug.
Me too.
So there's that. The other thing we wanted to remind folks of is I think we still have about just under 50 seats left in our live trip to Bangor coming up on June 15th. Obviously we're completely sold out of the tours. Those went very, very quickly, and we do apologize again for that. But there's still plenty of seats left for the live event on that Saturday night. So if you're going to be in the area, or you just want to go to be in the area and hang out for the weekend, you can't go on the tour with us, but there's still tons of other stuff to do in Maine and Bangor, and want to catch the live show. Still plenty of seats left for that. It's going to be really cool, y'all. It's going to be big. We're right now trying to figure out where the trivia night is going to be held, because there's way more people interested in that than we were thinking. So we're trying to figure that out, but it's a hell of a weekend. So if if you've been like still kind of weighing your options and deciding whether or not you wanted to come or not, I think now is the time to make that choice. We're like, what, 3 months out, Matt?
That sounds roughly correct.
Yeah. So yeah, check that out. That link is, I bet you don't have this one.
Less on the ball now.
You should have known.
Should have.
I think it's just doofmedia.com/kingslingerslive, which will send you to our landing page, which will get you to the ticket page. Yeah, that'll work. Okay, do that. doofmedia.com/kingslingerslive. There's still about, I think, 49, 48, somewhere around there, seats left for that live event. So if you want to come hang out and meet Robin Firth and listen and maybe ask her some questions, let's do it. Let's do it.
I can't wait.
Man, maybe we should start like writing notes down for our announcements.
Not a bad idea.
Ahead of time. But that is not for right now, because right now we are moving on to this week's reading. And we're going to begin with a How to Draw a Picture chapter, Matt. How to Draw a Picture 6. Like all of the other ones, this chapter opens with just a single line of advice. Keep your focus. It's the difference between a good picture and just one more image cluttering up a world filled with them.
Yeah, I really feel like King is getting a lot of his own private thoughts about what makes good art, and specifically good books, off of his chest.
Mm-hmm.
Because almost everything Edgar, says and things could apply just as well to writing and literature. And you can just as easily imagine this being the difference between a good book and just one more rag cluttering up the world filled with them.
Yeah. I do like. I asked you this at the very beginning of the book, and I think you kind of didn't have an answer for me yet. It is kind of interesting to think about what this is, right? Like, what is the How to Draw a Picture section? Because, I kind of was trying to play coy at the beginning and be like, oh, who's the one writing this? And you were just like, it's Edgar. And and I was just like, maybe.
It might not be.
But I mean, at this point, we're on the 6th one. It is increasingly becoming clear that it is Edgar. And one thing like that happens in this one right here is that the narrator, Edgar, starts putting himself in the narrative of the How to Draw Pictures more. It's mostly been just relaying the story of Elizabeth and her family, but now he's putting himself in here. So it says, I know all this. Elizabeth drew some and I drew some. I win, you win. And so it seems like he's like, especially in this one, he's positioning himself more to be part of the story than he had previously. And the question there, the one that I asked at the beginning of this long paragraph I'm speaking, was, well, what are these? Like, is this actually Edgar jotting down information? Like what is it? Like, what is this book? Right? Like, is this meant to be epistolary? Are these parts meant to be epistolary? I don't know.
I mean, there are parts in the main text, if I recall correctly, that kind of feel like he's telling us the story, right? That he's or potentially writing a memoir or a tale of what went down here on the island. And he's certainly in these sections right here, it really seems like he's relating to us, or to some other in text third party audience what happened, and it could be just a private diary also, obviously. um it's also, as you said, it's becoming clear that the events of the distant past that happened with Elizabeth are extremely relevant, and
Mhm.
um in some sense the past isn't even the past, because the whatever darkness it was that caused all this grief for Elizabeth is still very much on this island, probably hasn't gone anywhere, and maybe is somewhat active, somewhat dormant throughout time. And one thing that we see is that Edgar is somehow magically aware of a lot of this information, and it's like he's channeling it somehow. Maybe he's channeling through the same power that he uses to do his paintings.
Mhm.
If so, it's kind of interesting because there's an implication that like a lot of time has passed. I guess it's more than an implication. He tells us a lot of time has passed, doesn't he? Um, I might be
Yeah.
crossing wires here, but it feels like the vantage point from which he is writing slash telling us the story of how to draw a picture is like much later than the events of the story.
4 years. Yeah. 4
Yeah,
years, he says.
that's what I
Mhm.
thought. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah. No, I think you're right there. And like, this is why this is important. I was thinking about this a lot this week because I was thinking about what would this book be if you just take the how to draw a picture sections out of it, right? Because I think there's still a way to convey the information that is necessary for the story about Elizabeth and her sisters and the things that happened to her in the 20s. Like, there's a way to do that without peppering the book with these interludes of how to draw a picture. And so, once you frame it like that, it's like, okay, well, then what purpose are they serving for the narrative? And one of the things, at least, that I think they're doing is they are really forecasting this dread and this bad thing coming. Now, it is true that some of the regular text, the normal chapters, do that as well. But like, this one in particular is really interesting to me because from here we're going to enter 2 chapters where, for the most part, like, things are really good for Edgar. Like, especially chapter 11, it's just a whole bunch of like, everything's coming up Edgar and things are going great, and he's attracting attention, and he's reconnecting with family members, and Pam isn't an asshole somehow, like that, like everything's great, going great. But we have this section that starts this, right? We have this where once again reminds us of the ominousness of this whole thing. That we get this statement here. Sometimes some questions I have never answered on my own to my own satisfaction, but I have drawn my own pictures, and I know that when it comes to art, it's perfectly okay to paraphrase Nietzsche. If you keep your focus, eventually your focus will keep you, sometimes without parole. So, like, once again, the thing that we've been talking about from the very beginning of the just like the power of art mixed with the other side of the scariness of it. And that's what these sections do to me, is they constantly remind me that despite all these things that are happening for Edgar, he's getting healthier, he's getting happier, he's making friends, and those people are getting better. It's there's the darkness underneath it all, and it's growing, and the idea of him shifting to become a more part of the how to draw a picture narrative is, to me, an indication that it's growing faster and sooner, and we're almost there. We're almost there to the turn that we know was eventually going to have to happen.
Yeah, and the nature of this darkness that we're obviously circling is tantalizingly obscure, because I really, if you ask me to guess, like, what is the bad thing that's going to happen? I'm like, so far we've got indications that there could be supernatural monsters, there could be a hurricane that destroys the island again, could be somebody just vanishes. The nature of the threat on Duma Key is chimeric, and
Mm-hmm.
it hasn't, there are many books we've read where the nature of the threat is very, very clear. I'd say most books.
Yeah.
This is maybe the least clear, in terms of like, what are we scared of? Where it's
Yeah.
looming dread. Feels very gothic, you could say, but I have no idea what I'm afraid of.
Yeah, like who should we be worried about? Should we, like, we know Edgar himself survives, right?
Right.
But other than that, what's going to happen to who, how, where, why? Yeah, all these questions remain completely open, and that is perhaps a little bit unusual for King too, right? That like he normally loves to tell us these things and then get to see how it all goes down, and he has kept. We do know that something is going to happen that is going to leave Edgar in a not great place, to where he flees to Mexico and starts what he calls his third life. We know that happens, but we don't know any of the details of it.
Right.
Yeah. All right, let's begin chapter 11, The View from Duma. Oh my God, I finished reading this chapter, and that's when I made my bad tweet that is not following Twitter, where I was just like, I love this book. I love this book. I love the hell out of this chapter. Like, despite all this ominousness we just talked about, like this just gets to be a chapter of as table setting, as you said, but also of just like, hey, what if everyone was just happy this week? Cool.
Yeah. And then the end. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
right.
It wouldn't make a good book in the long run, but that we get it here is just delightful.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's a pleasant little rest stop for us.
So we meet Edgar standing on the beach with his now fully sighted friend Wireman, who pledges him a life debt. He has a blank check, Wireman says, and whatever Edgar needs, Wireman will do it. And I love this line here. I was clear on something else as well. When someone offers you a blank check, you must never, ever cash it. That wasn't a thing I thought out. Sometimes understanding bypasses the brain and proceeds directly from the heart. Ugh, love it.
Yeah, really beautiful ideas. Edgar is just full of these pearls of wisdom, particularly this week. I mean, in general, I feel like his internal monologue is full of these little aphoristic pieces of wisdom. But particularly so this week.
And perhaps I'm overthinking this. Let me know. I thought about this a lot, and the choice of words there to say, it bypasses the brain and proceeds from the heart. I thought about this in reflection of how we are discussing who Edgar is and perhaps who he was, right? Like the idea that his brain is the thing that's kind of damaged and injured and broken and trying to heal. But this feeling he gets doesn't come from that spot. It comes from something deeper. It comes from his heart. It comes from his soul. Like this idea that, maybe this is a hint at who Edgar was all along, that he was that type of person who would never, like, because I think the reason I thought about this, because I was trying to say in my head, oh, is the pre-Edgar accident the type of person that would definitely collect these blank checks and cash them, and there was a part of me that wanted to say yes, because like they wanted to say, oh, he's like this very shrewd businessman who has built this company up from nothing, and he would absolutely, if someone owed him a favor, he would definitely call on that favor if it meant turning a profit on something. And then I was like, well, that's not fair, because I don't actually know that, and that's just like supposition based on what the image of this pre-accident Edgar that I'm trying to form. And then this line here is here. And it's like, well, maybe this is saying something deeper about who he is and who he always was. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I feel like I don't know. That's an interesting way of framing it. Actually, you're giving me pause. I think I agree with you basically that this is just Edgar's true heart. And he's living in line with his best self now, but I still don't think he was ever the kind of person who would have held something over somebody. Yeah. I mean, maybe, like, that's the thing. We're so blank on that whole time in his life. I'm honestly at this point, frankly, not sure how much of this I'm supposed to consider to be like a plot mystery versus just, no, it just doesn't matter, so we're not writing about it. Like it's not that this is being tantalizingly hidden from us. It just is irrelevant, and so we're not writing about it. I think earlier in the story, I was very convinced that this was super important and mysterious, and I'm starting to feel like we may never find out the answer to the mystery, because maybe there was never a mystery. We'll see, I guess.
But yeah, I mean, one of the things that I do think is interesting is that perhaps that's the point, is that who Edgar was before doesn't actually matter, and that's not why we're not highlighting it. Like I think it makes a lot of sense for us analyzing this book and for readers reading this book to just be like, well, I want to know who this person was before this accident. You know, we keep talking about how much he's changed. Well, what does that mean if we don't know, if we don't have an anchor for that change? But I think the book has kind of told us over and over again that other person is irrelevant, that the change has happened. He's this person now. This is his new life. This is who he is. And I mean, I think Wireman said it best last week, right? We were basically like, you know, I consider everything that I'm suffering now just birth defects. I don't even blame that previous version of me. I try not to think of that previous version of me. This is me now. And I wonder if that's the point, is that
Mhm.
like, you know, he's kind of telling us, King is, don't worry about who exactly these people were before, because it doesn't matter
Yeah,
ultimately.
that feels right to me. I
Mhm.
like that.
So Edgar debates on whether he should fill Wireman in on what happened the previous night in his room, and decides that he's going to do so, which is, I think, a sigh of relief for us. You know, knowing that the quartet of the Wireman Edgar quartet will stay strong. He tells him the entire story, including the two twin ghost girls that appeared at the foot of his stairs. Wireman believes him, of course, which is good, and I think Wireman argues that, yeah, they were probably real.
Hmm.
It was like you were kind of trying to make it seem like they maybe weren't real, but they were probably real.
Hmm.
But they
They
can't hurt you. Ghosts can't hurt you, right?
right. They take this very much in stride, don't they? They're just like, yeah, there's a lot of supernatural shit going on. Ghosts, yeah, there's probably ghosts. That doesn't surprise me. Um,
I have like a general rule of life is, if someone ever tells you, "Oh yeah, but don't worry about it, ghosts can't hurt you," your immediate response should be, "Yeah, huh?"
yeah,
Because probably.
yeah. I'd be like, and how do you know that?
The other thing we learn here is that Wireman's brain is fixed now, and because his brain is fixed, he's lost his special power. He's lost his shine. He says specifically that only broken people are special on Duma Key, and that feels like something we need to talk about for a bit here, right?
Hmm. Yeah, I
So
mean,
what do you think about that? Like, this
yeah.
is uh,
It,
broken equals special. What does that mean?
I don't know exactly. You know, it's obviously important, right? Like, yeah, this is also the first time I can think of, um, in any King story, really, where a character has had the shine and lost it. I might be forgetting something, obviously, but can't think of any other examples of somebody losing the shine, which really does tie together these ideas of it's only the special who have the shine, and to be broken is to be special. You know, is this only true on Duma Key, or is this a greater statement King is making? I guess it doesn't matter either way, because insofar as this book is concerned, he's connecting the ideas of being broken and being special and being powerful, being magical, having access to something that other people don't. You think specifically about what Wireman says about Edgar, is that Edgar, you know, it's not so much that he's a special painter, it's that he's special at seeing. He has a special sight. Um, and he wouldn't have this special sight if he hadn't had this horrible thing happen to him.
Yeah.
Um, so that's all in my head. Another question that's been preying on me, I mean, kind of this whole time, but it's become more in focus for me, is the question of, like, is it good to be special on Duma Key, or is it bad to be special on Duma Key,
Mm-hmm.
or is it somehow maybe both to be special on Duma Key? Because you know, the people who are special on Duma Key tend to be able to create these all-time great works of art. That's good, but then we know that there's something dark here, and we know that there was a giant hurricane, and we know that some little girls were drowned, and we know that there's probably other weird things that happened that we don't even know about. And are these connected? Is that because these special powerful people keep coming to Duma Key? Is that
Yeah.
what is enabling these bad things to happen? Um,
Yeah, I mean, it's this kind of, to step back from a little bit, that it's the question of, do I need to be broken to create beautiful art.
Mhm.
And I think that's something that every artist has probably wondered about themselves. Like I know King specifically talked about his journey of getting sober and the fear that he had that, like, oh, maybe this all comes from the drugs or the alcohol, that, you know, if I cut all the stuff out of my life, is there any of my creativity left? And of course there was. But you know, that's something that people worry about. And that's really, this is a really interesting wrinkle on it too, that like the tragedies and the things that break us are the things that drive us towards a certain level of creation, of a certain viewpoint on the world that allows us to create beautiful things. And is that the only way? Well, no, but it gives me a power, right? And that's terrifying, right? Because as you said, like, I think that the metaphor works perfectly here, because is that good? Is it good that exists? Is it good that the only way to make something beautiful is to be a little bit broken?
Mhm.
No, no, it's not.
Yeah. And it's not clear to us yet kind of how the story's going to land on this question either. I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah.
it seems like it's going to land in a bad direction, but I don't know. It also seems like it's saying something more complicated. Like, I'm sort of self-consciously phrasing this as like, is it good or bad? And it's like, okay, things are never going to be that simple.
Yeah.
Um, but that's what I find myself pondering.
Yeah, I mean, I think the book is asking us to think about these things. I think these are the things that were on King's mind as he was writing this book. You know, he's talked a lot about the creation of art in this story generally, and then like the mysteries of the act of creation, the wonderful, beautiful bits of the act of creation, but also the terrifying, you know, soul investigating and possibly crushing bits of it as well.
Mhm.
And that's all up for grabs here as we approach the end of this book, for sure.
Yep.
So Edgar gives Wireman his portrait, which he of course loves. We're told it's absolutely beautiful. And once again, I want to reiterate that I wish I could see this. I wish I could see this portrait.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
Matt tried to get an AI to make it after last week's episode, and it did not go well.
It was very funny because the first thing I said without any context was just Wireman looks west. And it made a man made out of spools of wire, like walking through a Western desert landscapes.
It did what you asked it to.
Yeah. So, 100% no notes.
But after getting this portrait, Wireman asked Edgar an important question, Matt. Looking at this beautiful, beautiful portrait, he says, "This horrible accident you went through seems to have given you this incredible gift to create these beautiful works of art." And he says, "Would you change the accident that gave you this gift? Would you go back and make it so it didn't happen, and thus give up this gift you found?" To which Edgar answers him quickly, "Yes, in a heartbeat." And Matt, I'm curious what you thought about that. Why do you think that is?
Yeah. So I didn't find this super surprising. And I think the text points to the answer. I think that while Edgar has made a lot of progress toward mentally moving on to his second life, he's still very much aware of the loss of his first life. He's very aware of the pain that he experienced and still experiences. He's very aware of the physical limitations that he had. He remembers the trauma of it and still sort of is living out that trauma in a sense. And I think it's entirely reasonable for him to feel like, no, being able to paint pretty pictures, while cool, certainly very cool, is not a fair trade for what he gave up.
Yeah, and one of the things he thinks about in this moment, as he's responding to Wireman, is the feeling that he was losing control of himself.
Mhm.
That something was taken away from him, where he didn't have control. The frustration of trying to come up with a word or an answer or a memory or an understanding, and being unable to pull that from himself, and how that drove him almost insane. And I think that's an interesting idea, right? Because what's happening to him right now, or at least what happened to Elizabeth, we're made to believe, is a sort of possession,
Mm.
with whatever this mysterious force on Duma Key is. That this thing found her, and channeled magical power through her to the point where it started, asserting its will more and more. And Edgar doesn't like that, right? And
Mhm.
so like this is one of the reasons why Edgar's accident hurt him mentally the most, was because of this feeling of loss of control of yourself, of losing yourself. And so we've got this really interesting dynamic here where, like, maybe you could argue he's the perfect person to be having this happen to him, because he's not just going to go quietly to this kind of possession, to where a person like young Elizabeth, where even I think in the How to Paint a Picture 7 that's coming up, it says, children are perfect for this because they're so imaginative, and I think they haven't abandoned their imagination to rationality or reason yet.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas Edgar is kind of perfectly placed to be the opposite of that. This is just conjecture here, right? I don't know, but it's just stuff that occurred to me as I was reading.
Yeah, that's a really cool idea, and I like that you've highlighted that the aspect of his injury that he really seems to have the most psychic struggle with is his memory loss, his difficulty reaching for words. He barely ever even like thinks about not having an arm. I mean, there's a few bits, especially this week. In fact, I think this week is one of the times when we get the most like him feeling embarrassed about the limitations around only having one arm.
Mm-hmm.
But he's typically his source of like real like bursts of rage have to do with not being able to find the right word.
Yep.
And that's purely mental. And I just think that's really interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. So from here, Matt, time moves on. We move into early March. Hey, wait, we're in early March right now. As Edgar continues to work, but also continues to put off the stuff he has to do to prepare for his lecture and art show. Like, Edgar has this event coming up, Matt. It's coming up really soon, and there are like 200 people coming to this event, and he hasn't made any real preparations about what he's going to say at that live show. All these people are coming, from all across the country. 200 people, Matt.
Uh-huh.
The place where he's holding his event seats 200 people,
uh-huh.
and he should probably start working on that show.
Uh-huh.
Right?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, he should. He should really, he really should start preparing at this point. Yeah.
Yeah. Edgar. The joke here, people, is Matt and I still have not prepared the live show that many of you have bought tickets for. And it also just happens to seat 200 people exactly. And so I read this and immediately felt guilty, even though we have plenty of time still and we'll be fine. But I freaked out a little bit.
Yeah. Very, very good joke, though, Scott. I have started preparing. I have started preparing. So.
Oh, really? What have you done?
There's a Google Doc.
Oh, is there?
There is.
Let me see if this is true.
You can't access it. It lives in Canada.
Okay. We've got more letters, though, Matt. In his painting, Edgar continues to paint girl and ship, and he's got 2 more letters, an S and an E add to the PER, which seems like you were on the right track then with Persephone, right? Except by the end of the week, we're basically kind of just told that the ship's name is Percy or Per se.
Yeah, the text, the text, and by the text I mean the audiobook reader, really emphasized the degree to which nobody knows how to say this word, because like it's almost like the book itself is like, maybe this was purse, maybe it was per se. Mm-hmm. Hard to say. Anyway, shrug. Moving on. And it's not a word I've ever heard before at all, so I don't feel bad about not guessing it.
Edgar says he Googles it, and all that he comes up with is like a school in like the Northeast or something. So naturally I turned around and Googled it, and the only thing that comes up for me is just per se, the phrase, which is actually 2 words. Actually, it's per space say, where this is just one. So you're a liar, Edgar. But yeah, but interesting, right? Because I think your guess was like really good there, and then we kind of just pivot away from it, but not totally, right? Because we still got the first 5 letters there.
We got to figure out what this per se place is. I mean, we know what it could be, but we don't really have our understanding yet.
Yeah. So finally, after weeks of nothing happening, Matt Wireman invites Edgar over to show him something. It's a handcrafted pamphlet invitation to his gallery show addressed very personally to his eldest daughter, Linny. Turns out, Matt, everyone has been freaking out due to Edgar's non-movement on any of the steps necessary to prep for the show. Do you think our people are freaking out?
I don't think. I honestly don't, because we have regular meetings.
We're also answering emails and not ignoring emails. So.
Yeah, we're on track. We're doing great, actually.
Yeah. The show's gonna be awesome, but I'm making a joke, people. We're in really good shape. The show's gonna be great, but it's just hilarious how much this reminded me as we moved into March, and I went, "Oh fuck, it's March already." That's just 3 months away. Oh shit.
Yeah, and all of the nervousness associated with a looming presentation of some kind. You're just like, oh fuck, stop it, stop talking about it.
Yeah. So we learned here basically that everyone was freaking out and stressed. Edgar hasn't been answering emails. He hasn't been doing admin stuff. He's been pushing everything off. And finally, Wireman, because he feels like he owes Edgar probably, and just because he's his friend, he picks up the slack and decides to do everything for him. And this all pays off in this really great moment where you see this beautifully personally crafted brochure invitation to the gallery show.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It's a great moment. I enjoy seeing how panicked and stressed out Edgar is, not by what he's doing and what he's thinking, but by what he's not doing and not thinking about. I thought this was a great way of conveying very clearly and accurately like what it feels like to be dreading something that you're going to have to do. Yeah. Because like we to say it, right out, he's not ruminating on how nervous he is. He's doing a great job not thinking about it and avoiding thinking about it. And
it's a really great tactic. I do it all the time at work. Oh, I got that meeting coming up tomorrow. I'm really nervous about. Well, I could A, prepare for it, or B, play a video game and just not think about it.
The funny thing about this is I've gotten so much better at not I've gotten so much better at doing this correctly as I've gotten older and more experienced, but you never quite get perfect at it, right? There's always that little bit of like, this sucks. I don't want to do this. And then you, I don't know. It's interesting. It's interesting. I wonder if is there ever a day when I will just be finished? I'll just be perfect.
Yeah. It's called death.
I can't wait.
The important thing though, Matt, is Wireman enlists the help of someone to help with this whole thing. And who does he ask for help, Matt? Who is it that helps him?
It's Pam.
It's Pam. She's back. And we get this line here. And right away, I discovered Pam still cares about you. She actually wants to call and tell you that, but she's scared you'll blow her off. Man, that's so nice of Pam.
What a sweetheart.
Look at this Pam. Like, you were just utterly convinced, and then suddenly, as if from nowhere, the true Pam returns.
Right.
Pam Prime.
Yeah, and I guess it totally redeems her from all the crazy shit she did. That she did a nice thing now, huh?
Well, no, of course not.
Oh, okay.
Of course not. But it is, I think, an important wrinkle on a character who, as we talked about, sucked, was a piece of shit. We didn't like her. But people are people, and just because they're bad in some ways doesn't mean they're bad in other ways. And this is a different side of Pam we finally get to see.
Yeah. People are people. So why should it be that Edgar and she should get along so awfully?
You can't just do that.
What?
You can't just do that.
I don't know what you're talking about. So I do love that we're making this complex, though. because I wondered, like, what are we doing? What are we doing with Pam? Like,
Mhm.
obviously, Pam is
Mhm.
important to the story. We keep bringing Pam back into the story, and at this point, you just feel so complicated about her. I mean, I feel the way about her that I end up feeling about a lot of people in real life, honestly, where it's like maybe I don't know, man. Like sometimes people in your real life they annoy you, and then they
Yep.
do something amazing and earn like a huge debt of gratitude, and you're like, like there's something really wonderful about this person, and maybe there's also something super annoying about this person, and those two thoughts can coexist in the same brain about the same person, and there's no contradiction. It's that just is what it is to be a human and interact with people and have friends. Um, my mom always said your friends aren't perfect, and I think that was one of those little bits of wisdom that I've kept with me because um, it's true. It's true. You expect people to be perfect, you'll be super disappointed all the time. Um,
Yeah, no, totally. You left off the last part of that thing though, where she says, "Except for Scott." Um,
right?
yeah,
She would always add that at the end, of
yeah,
course.
yeah,
Yeah,
very
yeah,
important. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. No, I mean, I agree. Like to me, obviously, it was fun to rag on Pam when we got to do it, and I genuinely do not like suddenly think she's completely redeemed, but it is much more enjoyable to have a more 3 dimensional character for sure.
Yeah, I agree. I agree.
But Edgar, Matt, his initial reaction to this is anger. He's mad. He's real mad. He feels betrayed. He feels lied to. He feels gone around. He feels like he's lost control, right? That's what we just talked about. One of the things with Edgar is he hates feeling like he's losing control, and he needs to be in control. And here someone wrestled control with him without his knowledge, and that makes him real mad. And for a brief moment he thinks about painting Wireman again, only this time fully blind. And the fact that he had that thought somehow makes that anger just immediately go away. And this is a pretty interesting moment, right? Because the tone of this book could have gone in a very different direction. We could have had Edgar travel down that path, this path of anger and vindictiveness to where, oh, I have this power to influence the people around me and punish them. Like we saw it with the rapist and murderer, Candy Brown. Like he has the power to do that. Well, what if he wants to do it to someone that pisses him off? And so
Mhm.
we could have gone a very different direction here. And the book is almost signaling to us, no, we're not going that direction. Like,
Yeah.
that's not what we're doing here.
I mean, I think there's a very interesting sort of mirror to literally what we just said about Pam, where Edgar is this man with this historical capacity for rage and wrath, and probably was a huge asshole. But he also has this huge capacity for compassion and love, and he's a good friend. He's a good father. He's a good man. He does have this streak of red in him. What is that red exactly? Is it the anger? Is it something more than the anger? And those two things coexist in the same person, right? And so
Yeah.
he can have this flash of rage at Wireman, but then that flash is immediately countered by his humanity, his love of his friend. And in fact, I think it makes total sense that, as soon as he thinks the thought, he's like, okay, that's horrible. Like
Mhm.
I'm not actually going to hurt Wireman. I love Wireman. I'm angry at Wireman right now, this second. That doesn't mean I want to hurt Wireman. And I think, functionally what it does is just having that thought shocks him back to his senses and causes
Yeah.
him to calm down.
It's great. It's great. And the cynic in me also says that perhaps part of the reason why is he realized that he does have quite a lot of control in his life, that he feels like these people were controlling everything, but he's like, oh no, I could blind this man at any moment if I wanted to. I am in control.
Yeah.
I don't think that's actually it, but I
Well,
like your version much better.
well, I mean, it's really interesting thought I unfortunately love that too. The idea that being able to successfully lash out at people is a kind of control. But I mean, I don't think that's it, because like when you fantasize about bashing somebody's head in with a rock, like it doesn't make you calm down. You're like
True.
that's typically not the immediate reaction. It's the fact that he loves Wireman. He doesn't want to actually hurt Wireman, I think.
I agree. I totally agree. But this part's so lovely, right? I mean, like Edgar gets to learn that everyone in his life is so incredibly happy for him and like shocked and awed by his skill, and they all want to and indeed are going to come down to the show. Like everyone. It just I don't know, it just makes you so happy. It makes you so warm and happy.
Yeah, I agree. It was overall, that's very much what's happening throughout most of this week's reading is these
Mhm.
touch points of sort of reassurance and wholesomeness.
Yep. But Edgar is still worried about the lecture. That's the one thing he's still worried about. And I love this moment here. So how do I do it? I asked. I was holding my palm on the side of Elizabeth's head, feeling the smoothness of her hair as I had often felt the smoothness of my daughter's after it had been shampooed. When memory takes its strongest hold, our bodies become ghosts, haunting us with the gestures of our younger selves. How do I talk about a process that's at least partially supernatural? There, it was out, the root of the matter. Yet Wireman looked calm. Edgar, he exclaimed. Edgar, what? The son of a bitch actually laughed. If you tell them that, they will believe you.
Once again, I feel like this book is just King getting some things off his chest.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's funny that he doesn't understand that like that actually makes him more alluring and interesting if he says, no, it's some supernatural process that I don't understand.
Yeah,
And people are like, ooh,
right.
oh.
I mean, he could even be like, sometimes I feel like it's this missing right arm of mine that paints the paintings, and it'd be like so metaphorical.
Yeah, yeah. I do love, I didn't pull it for this, but that line about, he's like brushing Elizabeth's hair or,
Mhm.
or just, patting it. I love that line. When memory takes its strongest hold, our
Mhm.
own bodies become ghosts, haunting us with the gestures of our younger selves. Oh,
Yeah,
that's a great sentence.
I know, and that's what I mean about Edgar being this vehicle for these amazing little wisdom drops,
Yeah.
um, more so than any character that I remember reading recently.
Hmm. So from here, Edgar has to make some calls, some apologies. And first up, it's Pam. And I'm not going to sit here and continue to gloat because indeed Pam still does kind of suck here, even as she's being nice to Edgar. Like it is interesting that, she's doing this incredibly nice thing, this incredibly compassionate thing for him. But we do get stuff like this where she, assumes Edgar has apologized. She's like, I accept your apology. And he didn't apologize.
Right. It's pretty funny.
And then we get this line: I've shown several unlovely sides of myself to several people since you left me, which is an amazing statement of Pam, like simultaneously acknowledging that she's been a shitty person, that she's had shitty behavior,
Uh-huh.
while also potentially rewriting history completely.
Uh-huh.
I mean, what is your read on this? Like, obviously, these two people have a very different outlook on why their marriage ended.
Yeah, I'm so confused. Uh it's entirely possible that this is just genuinely what she remembers happening, or in fact that this is what actually happened, and that Edgar's memory, being brain damaged, he just doesn't understand how their marriage actually broke apart. He literally misremembers it, but that seems a little far fetched. Like I think it is just that she has distorted the story of what happened to make herself look good,
Yeah.
which is a much more mundane and common
And Pam,
explanation.
it's a super Pam move for
It
sure.
is a very Pam move, yes.
Yeah, I mean to try to be charitable to her, I wonder if like, a read of this is when she's saying left me, she's not speaking specifically about the marriage, but that like you after your accident, you left. You like mentally, like you weren't there anymore. You left this marriage behind in your anger and your frustration and all that stuff. And that's I mean, obviously like it's not his fault, right? But I wonder if she sees it that way, that just genuinely sees it as like this thing happened to you and I lost you. The you that I knew left, and the person that was here, I don't know who that person is.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's accurate. Like I think that's probably the dynamics of it.
Yeah.
I'm yeah, that's makes sense. I'm remembering the end of a certain movie where a woman asks, why did you leave me? And the man says, I'm right here. What are you talking about? And then she drops the wedding ring out of her hand, and then your mind is blown. Everybody knows what I'm talking about, right?
A certain movie. Are you are you worried about spoiling the
I don't
Sixth
want to.
Sense
I
for
don't want to
people?
spoil The Sixth Sense.
I think the statute of limitations on Sixth Sense spoilers has expired a long time ago. I think
I
you're good.
guess so. It's one of those ones that you really don't want to have spoiled, though. So
That's fair. That's fair. So Pam reminds Edgar, she's basically saying, it's so impressive what you've done and what you're capable of doing, but I guess I shouldn't be surprised because that one year that our daughter Melinda got very, very sick, you were drawing all those cartoon books for her all the time. But Edgar has managed to completely forget this. And this is interesting, Matt, because, you know, maybe this is just me, but like there's stuff in my life that I did, when I was much younger that I forget all the time. But like when someone reminds me of it, like the neural pathways will usually reconnect and I'll be like, "Oh, yeah, I haven't thought about that in a decade or 2 decades. But now that you mention it, I do remember doing that."
yeah,
That's not what happens here. What
yeah,
happens here is even after being reminded of it, he says, "I vaguely recall one of the character names you're talking about, but I do not have any memory of creating these drawing books for my daughter." And that's interesting.
yeah. I mean, it kind of connects with how Elizabeth consistently denies ever having been an artist. I think she probably remembers that she was an artist, but she denies that she was. And it's like there's this erasure of the past of having been an artist. And there's I guess it's worth saying it's not like Edgar is at this point in the story. It's not like he's constantly forgetting things. Um,
Yeah.
the forgetting things happens quite rarely, actually. So for him to have forgotten something like this, it feels somewhat supernatural or related to what's going on with him and his mysterious drawing abilities.
Yeah. I mean, I don't want to read. I don't want to read supernatural stuff into everything that happens, but it did strike me as something very specific and weird that it's worth calling out at least.
Yeah, like I mean, I think I think I can probably remember like literally every drawing I've ever done in my life because a drawing is like one of those actions that takes a ton of your attention and your creativity, and usually takes a while, and then you like look at what you did and you're like happy with it. And this is not just a drawing, this is books
Yeah,
of
multiple
drawings.
books with
Like
entire characters. Yeah.
you've got to put the books together, you've got to think of the stories. I mean, this is more like forgetting um god, like a class you took or something,
Uh-huh.
like it's like, what? No, you can't. So yeah, there's something weird going on, whether or not it's supernatural. I mean, it's it's weird. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Overall, though, this is the best we've seen of these two together, right? Like you can kind of perhaps squint at this sequence and see what their relationship might have been before all of this. Like, I think that's a question you asked early on, was like, why was he even with this person?
Right.
But this is a version of her you could be like, okay, I kind of see it now. Pam is decent here. I even like the when he says Pam and she goes, "What, hun?" I love that moment too. Like it's a good scene. It's
Yeah.
good.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, just we've sort of only seen them at their worst.
Mm-hmm.
And so we got a really, really harsh judgment on them. And yeah, I agree. This makes things make a bit more sense.
Yep. So Edgar now calls the gallery and discusses the slide order for his upcoming lecture. So he's finally taking steps to do something about that. We also see that he's going to call the series "The View from Duma," which is where our chapter title gets its name from.
Yep.
Really cool. And then he moves on to Linny, who he calls in France. And I love this conversation so much. Like we've gotten so little with him and his eldest daughter. And there's this real sense of tension here at the beginning of this call, where we, not just because they've been worried about him and haven't heard from him, but this is more of that adult child thing that we were talking about last week, where, Linny is clearly living with a boy and there's just that awkward, how do we address this? Unsure of what my dad's reaction to that news is going to be. We're on Edgar's side. It's like, do I say anything? Is it worth like pushing back on that? What is my role here? Just wonderful writing, I think.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like it makes you wonder if some of this tension that exists between Lenny and Edgar is because she's making choices in her life that she feels he wouldn't approve of, and so she kind of preemptively puts up walls.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, I think it's bigger than that, honestly. But in fact, we're about to see that it is indeed bigger than that. But
Yeah.
there does seem to be some of this dynamic where she went all the way to France. She's living in France. It's like it's sort of a that in of itself is a kind of subtle distancing move. Like I'm not
Yeah.
saying that you're I'm not,
Subtle? So good. That's subtle.
I'm not saying
I went to France.
so like it's not like she went to France to get away from her dad specifically,
Sure.
but like it's the kind of thing that can be read into as like, well, she probably doesn't have a super close relationship with her parents if moving overseas um was an option. I say that and I immediately am like, that's not really true. People just have to move overseas sometimes,
Yeah.
regardless of what relationship they have with their parents.
Yeah. I would hope that I would try not to read into any future where any of my kids want to go to a college very far away from where I am and take it personally. I would hope that I would not be that person. But no, I mean, I do think there's something, at least in the story there, to she's distant both physically and emotionally from her father.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And maybe this is why.
Uh-huh.
I had a momentary image of how she'd looked at 7 when she'd been so sick Pam and I both thought she might die on us, although we'd never said it aloud. Back then, Melinda had been all big dark eyes, pale cheeks, and lank hair. Once I remember thinking skull on a stick and hating myself for the thought, and hating myself more for knowing in the deep reaches of my heart that if one of them had to sicken that way, I was glad it had been her. I always tried to believe that I loved both my daughters with the same weight and intensity, but it wasn't true. Maybe it was for some parents. I think it was for Pam, but it never was for me. And did Melinda know? Of course she did. Ooh.
Oof.
Ooh. Yep.
I wonder if there are certain books where King is like, hey, kids, maybe you don't need to read this one. It's not very good.
Yeah, Joe, Owen, it's fiction. It's fiction. Don't read anything into this at all.
Yeah, don't. I've never had this thought. No, it's heavy, man. Heavy shit there. Okay, we're building up towards something terrible happening, and there are all these threats to daughters, and the island is a bad place for daughters. And now we're saying, like, if one of my children had to die, I definitely know which one I would prefer. I don't know, Scott. I am not a rocket scientist, but I feel like we might be hinting in a certain direction.
No way, man. No way. You're totally off base.
I mean, I'm pretty sure Pam's going to die horribly. That's going to happen.
What do you got against Pam?
Nothing. Just a bias, I guess.
Sure. So then he calls Ilsa his favorite. She's excited for the show, but we quickly learn, Matt, that things aren't going great with her fiance. She doesn't give us all the information, but it seems like Edgar's painting is coming true, and little hummingbird Connor is, we're told, going to have to make a decision. I don't know, what's your opinion here? I think Edgar kind of nails the adult parent role here. He checks in on her, he sees how she's doing, but he doesn't pry. And because of that, we don't really understand the full scope of what is happening with her boyfriend currently, because he doesn't pry into it. Yeah. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I agree. He makes it clear that if she wants to talk about it, he's there to talk about it. He's not going to be judgmental, but he also isn't rubbernecking. And yeah, I think that's the right, that's the golden mean right there, because you also don't want to, you don't want to feel like your parent is prying. You also don't want to feel like they don't care. That's what's tough. I think he hits the spot.
I love Ilsa's line of questioning at the end of the phone call about her mom and dad, and if he feels that marrying her was a mistake. She once again says, if you could go back and change things, would you? And Edgar, once again, for the second time in this chapter, says, no, I would not. I would. Well, okay.
Or he says no this time. He said yes the first time, right?
Yeah. So, yeah. he would I've confused myself, but yes, essentially he says that he would not he would still marry her, he would still do
Right.
all that stuff the same. Yeah.
Right. And I think, well, so I like what you said a bit ago about control, because I think that kind of clicked things together for me, because being crushed by a crane is just pure losing control. Like
Mhm.
you didn't choose any of this. This is just a thing that happened to you. Whereas marrying the woman that he loved and having children with her and having a life, and maybe things didn't quite go the way he would have wanted them to if he had his druthers, but ultimately he made his choices. That doesn't mean he necessarily had control in the sense of like controlling everything, but he made his choices, and so I think it makes sense to him that he would not regret having made these choices and lived this life, and he would, you know, turn back the clock in the case of just this terrible thing that befell him. And yes, it came with some perks, but those don't offset the loss of control, which is,
Yeah.
as you pointed out, kind of the crux of his character.
Yeah, no, I like that. I like that a lot. Yeah, that art is great, but family is
Yeah,
everything.
yeah, and I think Stephen King probably feels the same way. Like,
Yeah.
I think he art, art in the, writing is an enormous part of his life. But I think he'd probably put his family first. I just get that vibe off the guy.
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah. So his call is completed. Edgar goes back to painting while jamming out to Shark Puppy, our our dairy locals
Uh-huh.
made into a fake band.
I love it.
Yeah, he's working on Girl and Ship number 8, which we eventually learn will be the last one in the series. And at least at this point in the book, the last thing he paints after he finishes Girl and Ship 8, he just stops painting.
Yeah, it's interesting.
From here, we cut Matt to the dreaded lecture as we see that Dario Nanuzzi is introducing him to the people. I love this line here. Names went past like floats in a parade. A few, like Edward Hopper and Salvador Dali, I knew. Others, like Vives Tanguy and Kay Sage. You can tell I don't know these names either. I didn't. Each unknown name made me feel more of an imposter. I love that. I love the imposter syndrome. Very real thing. I have it all the time. Um, and I think the idea that like being compared to people you don't know is the thing that activates your imposter syndrome, I think is just absolutely great.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting to consider that maybe his imposter syndrome is sort of worse in a sense because there's like a magical force that's possibly channeling through him. But I think maybe what King would say is, but that's how every artist feels.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Edgar is finally called up on stage and is about to completely freeze up until he sees who? Dr. Xander Kamen himself, flown down at Wireman's request to be here at the lecture. Kamen's presence and his mouthing of "you can do this" works magic on Edgar, and he finally begins his lecture. This is a wonderful, wonderful moment here, Matt.
It is a wonderful moment. I think overall this scene is great. This is the most terrifyingly accurate depiction of how it feels to have stage fright that I've ever read. Of course, the worst part of stage fright is that it's the stage fright itself that causes your brain to lock up, which then makes it impossible to like solve problems or remember the things that you were going to say.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's exactly the loss of control. Like I'm doing the spiderweb corkboard thing in my head here because it's like when you uh, when you're up on stage, it's like the time when you need to most have your wits about you, but
Yeah.
it's the time when you're most likely to have your mind gummed up by the anxiety or just the sort of like being overly amped. Even at best, you're not necessarily at your best, right? You're somewhere short of that. I don't know. I
Mhm.
just felt it to be a very uh, accurate and thorough depiction of what it feels like to be in that
Yeah.
situation.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. It's great, and also Cayman's presence here being the thing that like pulls him out of that and reasserts himself is pretty perfect. I think there's a lot of reasons for this. I think the book gets into them a little bit, like the mouthing of "you can do this." I think is a specific trigger phrase for him. But I also think like just the idea that Cayman was this guy who just a few months ago, maybe even less, like knew he was about to kill himself because he was just so distraught and destroyed about his life. And now this guy that told him to wait is standing there as he's up on stage giving a an art lecture, and it just allows him to maybe perhaps reframe how far he's come in that short amount of time and focus up. It's pretty great.
Yeah, I totally agree. Felt
So
very natural.
who would your Xander Kamen be? Who would you want in the front row of your lecture?
So it's just you and me here, right, Scott?
Yeah.
So when I give a public speech of whatever kind, I sometimes imagine that certain mentors of my past, sometimes it depends on the situation. I often remember like my old academic advisor from grad school, just like being there, and he is a person who's just like a very solid, calming presence. And also it helps that he often was there for a lot of my earliest important public speeches. And so it would probably be him. But also the funny thing is I literally just imagine, I just imagine Mike Kamen being in the audience. That's the thing that I do actually. So,
Well, that's great. I love that.
So yeah, I'm glad I told you this secret, and no one else will ever hear
No
this.
one else will know. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. So Matt, he fucking nails this speech though. Like he nails it. He does so good. And it's not fair, actually. It's not fair that writers get to write speeches for their characters, and because they're writers, they're like better public speakers than any of us could ever be because they're writers. It's not fair. It's not fair.
It's not. It sets the expectations way too high.
Should we reach out to Stephen King and see if he could please write our Bangor show for us?
Yeah, I mean, and we don't tell anyone that's what happened. We pretend that this is just the way we talk, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
So yeah. Edgar tells a story. He wows the audience. I particularly like this quote right here. I told my friend Kamen that I used to draw, but I hadn't done it in a long time. He suggested I take it up again, and when I asked why, he said, because I needed hedges against the night. I didn't understand what he meant then because I was lost and confused and in pain. I understand it better now. People say night falls, but down here, it rises. It rises out of the gulf after sunset's done. Seeing that happen amazed me. It's a pretty cool turn of phrase there, right?
It is. It's almost like it was written by a professional novelist. Yeah.
What do you think about the night rising? Is that a good thing?
Yeah, that's. I was thinking about that. Like it's a beautiful, like you said, it's a beautiful turn of phrase, but also it's like darkness rising out of the ocean is definitely a Sith coded phrase.
Yeah. But the rest of the show, though, despite ominousness, goes like a dream for Edgar. Basically, he can't even remember it. It just goes just like a good dream, and everything goes great as he walks everyone through his art. Later, he catches up with Xander, and we learn, Matt, that the reason he is here is not necessarily because of Wireman, but actually because of Pam.
Yeah.
Because Wireman called Pam in a panic, and Pam suggested that Kamen come. So that's it. We've achieved it. It's Pam-demption.
Okay. Yeah.
Pam
okay.
the final Pam.
The final Pam. Deep cut. Yes. Fine, Scott. But why was she being so horrible to him before? I still feel like there's a piece missing here. I know I sound like a broken record. Even if I'm happy to see them, mending in this way, to see their relationship transforming into something positive. What happened? What the fuck happened in the past? I'm so confused. And maybe I'm supposed to be, but I still am.
Well, see, here's the thing is, she sucks a little bit.
Okay.
And so he was hurt and she didn't like that. But now he's not hurt anymore and he's making pretty pictures. So she likes him again.
Oh, that's super cynical. I love it.
I mean, I don't actually believe that. I think one thing I did think about, was this idea of, are all these people just being nice to me because I'm talented at art? Like all these people in my life that are coming and flying down here. What if I wasn't good at drawing pictures? It made me think about Stephen King post recovery and post like considering retirement and perhaps the fear of all these people only like me because I'm good at this thing I do, that
Yeah.
these things I create.
Right.
What if I stop doing that? What if I lose that? What happens to that? And that's not like, that's not really textual in the book. Like that's just kind of my external thought process, but it did keep occurring to me, and stuff like this, like asking the question of like, is Pam just being nice to him because she like looked at his pretty pictures and went like, oh holy shit, look at this guy?
Yeah.
Because like it's not money, right? Because she's got plenty of money.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't know either. I don't know. I mean, yeah, I'm confused. I'm just genuinely not sure what exact role Pam serves. I like the idea. I was thinking about this before. I like the idea that maybe what we're doing with Pam is we're just showing like a naturalistic sort of evolution of a relationship. Like he had his first life and now he's having his second life. He had his first relationship with Pam and now he's having his second relationship with Pam. And it's a totally different relationship. It's not a husband wife relationship, but there's some echo of that relationship, much like he doesn't have the body he used to have. They don't have the relationship they used to have, but there's maybe in some ways they can have a better relationship than they used to have, potentially, if she doesn't die horribly soon.
Yeah, and I think in the wake of a divorce, even if like regardless of what caused the divorce or why it's happening, like people can and do say very shitty things to each other.
Yeah.
So that it could just be that, right? It's like the divorces are complicated and messy, and there's a lot of feelings, and people can be mean when they're in those feelings.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I don't know. But Matt, Xander has gotten Edgar a present. And there's a present suggested to him by Ilsa. And one that takes all these good vibes we're feeling in this chapter, Matt, and turns them all sour in an instant, because it's a doll, a red-headed doll to match the Reba that Edgar already has. Twins. They has twins now.
Great. Thanks, Xander. I'm going to start buying my friends extremely foreboding and creepy presents. They'll love it.
Just dolls? It's obviously the implication here, like Edgar says here right at the end of the thing, something had reached out. That was why something had reached out and put the idea in my daughter's head.
Yeah.
that there needs to be twins at Big Pink again.
It needs to be twins. I mean, I think I sort of gestured at this earlier, but I'm just going to say out loud, like he has two daughters, right? He has two daughters. They're not twins, but he talks about how they used to be thick as thieves together, and they looked similar, and you could sort of squint and see his daughters as twins. So this idea of twins is recurring in that specific way.
Yeah. I wish I could have like been in the scene where Ilsa first suggests this present, because like it's weird.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, oh, remember that doll you gave him to help with his anger management issues? Well, it's been really helpful for him. So if you're looking for like a present to get him, why not get him another one?
Didn't help too.
And then Xander's like, oh, okay.
Yeah. He can have one, and then he can hold one in each hand. Oops. Yeah, no, it doesn't make any sense at all. And I agree that I agree with Edgar that there's something supernatural happening here.
It would be like you gave your kid like a PS5 and then someone goes, man, he's really enjoying that PS5. You know what you should get him? Another PS5.
Thanks, Dad. No, that's very good.
Great. Yeah.
Do you remember how on the My Brother and Me podcast they do a feature on actually haunted dolls sometimes?
Well, I mean, okay, you say actually as if the dolls are really haunted, but yes.
I mean, the Etsy/eBay sales page says they are actually haunted.
Yeah. Haunted Doll Watch. I remember it well.
Yeah. I was just thinking about that while he now has two actually haunted dolls in his house.
Should we get one? If you go to eBay and find a haunted doll named Reba, I think we have to buy it.
Yeah. So you know that I'm like probably the least superstitious person, you know?
Yeah.
I don't really want an actually haunted doll in my house.
All right. birthday present ideas are going.
I really could do without that, actually.
All right, fine. I'll just have your daughter strongly suggest it to
Thanks.
your therapist.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
All right, Matt, we move on to chapter 12 titled Another Florida. This chapter begins with Edgar's interview with Mary Eyre, who it turns out, Matt, is just like fucking trashed during this whole thing. She's just drunk as shit. And she basically kind of sort of starts hitting on him at the end. I think she specifically says, if I were a decade younger, I'd try to sleep with you, which is a wild thing to tell someone.
I think the way I read the situation is she is 100% hitting on him, leaving it open that if he makes his move, then things will occur. But Edgar does not actually pursue, is what happens.
Yeah, it's great. My favorite part of the interview, though, is when Mary starts asking Edgar questions about his technical technique, not where like his inspiration comes from, but basic shit like, hey, how do you make sure the eyes are the correct distance apart? How do you center the mouth on the face? Like basic shit that basically any artist probably has to deal with at some point while painting or drawing.
Yeah.
That he's just never thought about at all, because that's not where his skill comes from.
Yeah. Well, I think she's not even really. My impression is she's not even really asking him in the sense of like wanting an answer. It's like she already knows the answer is that he won't know what she's talking about, even though these are all basic things that. I mean, I learned about like most of the stuff she's saying from like a book that I read when I was in middle school on how to draw faces. Mm-hmm. So this is not even like esoteric lore you learn in art school. This is just like any resource on how to draw human faces is going to have this stuff in it. And of course, Edgar has no idea about this. He's just like, yeah, I just drew Wireman the way he is.
Yeah, correctly. I just looked at a picture of him and then drew that. What he like? It's hard. Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, I mean, like the human eye is like very, very, very good at clocking incorrectness in a human face. Like we're very good at pattern matching faces, right? Where we can see faces in like anything and everything, but we're also very, very good at being like, that face is wrong.
Yeah.
And so that's drawing faces is really, really hard. I of course can't do it at all, but hard shit.
I think I might have mentioned this the previous week, but I've been like drawing and painting since we started reading this book, just because monkey see, monkey do. Mm-hmm. I'm like, I draw a car and I'm like, hey, I drew a car. That looks pretty good. And then I draw like one of my kids' faces and I'm like, this looks like shit. It doesn't look like them at all. Like it looks like a kid. Sure. It looks like some kid. It doesn't look like my kid. And it's because you detect like the slightest millimeter of difference between where the features are and where they should be. But it's funny because the actually correct advice for drawing is actually just, well, you just draw what you see. But in order to get good enough at drawing, in order to draw what you see, first you have to do a bunch of bullshit exercises.
Yeah, but no one wants to talk about that stuff because that's not the romantic part of drawing. Just like you probably have to do a bunch of bullshit exercises to write a story well. Yeah. Like you need to practice. It's a craft. It's work. You need to practice. Yeah, right. Craft. Thank you. That's the word I was looking for.
Yeah. Yep.
So the interview over, Mary starts giving Edgar a history lesson while, as you said, probably trying to bang him. Mm-hmm. We learn about the Elder Eastlake and his good friend Dave Davis. And this is an interesting little wrinkle here, Matt. The Eastlakes are an invention of King, but Dave Davis and the Davis Islands are all real. That is a truth. There's this real estate mogul down in Florida that created this island basically from nothing. Even the story of him disappearing mysteriously on a European voyage is a real story as well. It is always fun when King kind of weaves his fiction through little bits of truth.
Yeah, I didn't realize that. That's really interesting.
So we learn a little bit more about Elizabeth, who for a while offered Big Pink out as a free kind of artist's retreat, but only recently decided to relist it to rent, and rent only if the person was willing to stay there for an extended amount of time. So the question is, why? Why, man?
Yeah,
Why?
I think this brings up my prior question. Like, is this all good or bad? To oversimplify, because like Elizabeth seems like this saintly figure. She seems angelic, like, and she wouldn't knowingly lure some artist into this house, knowing that it was going to, like, yes, boost their artistic powers, but then like feed on them and lead to some some tragedy, lead to ghost girls appearing in their house. She wouldn't knowingly do this, right? Right. Um, I don't know. I don't know what to make of it.
Yeah. Yeah, we don't know. I think it is, everything that happens with Big Pink is kind of lined up specifically to make it so Edgar finds it, right? Like, he was not an artist at the time, so an artist retreat would not be a thing that he would be looking for. He was also looking for long-term rentals, so something that specifically required a long-term status would be something that would catch his eye, or he would be sent it by the travel agent that he was working through. So like, it does seem like this change was specifically happened to get Edgar there. Now, whether Elizabeth did that consciously or the influence of the key was acting upon her, I don't know.
Yeah, right. That's a good question.
And then the subject turns to Elizabeth and Elizabeth's drawing. Mary says that Elizabeth was very adamant that she never drew, she never painted, but she's got a friend that says elsewise. And of course, we do know it's the truth. And this is the first of a 3-beat throughout this chapter of Edgar asking people, did Elizabeth ever paint? And being told definitively that no, she did not, despite the fact that yes, she did.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. It's again, I don't know, maybe it's the spurious connection, but it reminds me of him having forgotten his past as an artist. And I mean, I get, she's disconnecting herself from it, right? She's no longer identifying as an artist. Probably she still could paint if she wanted to. I guess that's a guess. That's not a probably. My assumption is that she could still paint if she wanted to, but she's sort of cut off that part of her life, and she denies it, and tells people that she never had it, because I think she associates it with all these bad things that happened.
Yeah, we don't know.
Yeah.
We do get this part that I wanted to talk to you about real quick, though. The Florida Elizabeth and her sisters grew up in was the one that existed after the Indians were gone, but before old Mr. White Man had fully consolidated his hold. Your little island would have looked very different to you. I've seen the pictures. It was cabbage palms covered in strangler fig and gumbo, limbo, and slash pine inland. It was live oak and mangrove in a few places the ground was wet. There was Cherokee bean and inkberry low on the ground, but none of that jungle shit that's growing out there now. The beaches are the only thing that's the same. And the sea oats, of course, like the hem of a skirt. The drawbridge was there at the north end, but there was just the one house. Like, this chapter is titled Other Florida, Another Florida, and there's a lot of talking about these different Floridas so far in this book, and how Florida has changed and over time. And I thought maybe if we could like try to make something of this, like what King is perhaps saying with this. What do you think?
I mean, yeah, it's interesting because like you could say the same of most U.S. states, because states are generally quite huge. Often cover many biomes, but here we're not talking about like, you go from desert to grassland as you go from West Texas to East Texas. We're saying no, it's changed over time. The beach is the same. Pointedly, the beach is the same. It's this liminal zone, but everything else has changed. It's become more like a jungle, and the jungle hides things and maybe covers things up. So maybe there were things inland that have now been covered up, and it's transformed. Maybe the island is on its second life too. Maybe the island was scarred by something and is now in its second life. I don't know. This is my free association. I'm not really too sure. What do you think?
Yeah, I like where you're at with that. I think it is really interesting to talk about this place that had another life, before, and then people came and it changed. Like we talked about that with when Edgar was looking at the house the first time, and it was done in this style. I'm forgetting the name now, but like a style of the rugged frontiersman Floridian, of a certain time that obviously has shifted and changed, and now the image of what Florida is now is completely different from that. And the type of people that live in Florida, the stereotypes, etc. But yeah, I mean, I like the idea of places. You go to places for a second life, but places themselves can have second lives and third lives and change as a result of the things that happen to them.
Yeah. Yeah. Love it. Love it.
Especially a place like Florida, where it experiences such rough storms that can greatly change the geography of the land.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, speaking of the island being scarred, maybe that was I was meaning it more metaphorically. Maybe it was literally scarred by this hurricane.
Mm-hmm. So Edgar leaves the interview finding out he's got an appointment with Elizabeth's doctor, made once again by the meddling wireman. At the office, Edgar feels this sudden need to grab the red pen off the desk, but he's not sure why. We'll see later that he uses this pen to draw a little red picnic basket along with Percy, the name of the ship. We know that this is an important picnic basket. We've heard about this before. It keeps getting referenced in the story. It's in the attic, we're told by Elizabeth, and it has them in it. So that's just some ominousness.
Yep. So my guess at this point is that the them is just the drawings, because we saw earlier that the drawings were in the attic, in the basket.
Yeah, it's specifically referenced here in a couple paragraphs of that damn red picnic basket full of her drawings.
Right,
yeah,
right. And so just to say it out loud, we got the red picnic basket, we got the red pen. We got the redness about Edgar. We've got the creature in the red robe. It was distinctly not the Crimson King, but still, there's a lot of very ominous darkness around this color.
Yep. But we're not going to deal with that right now, right?
No, we're not. We're just gonna mosey along, Edgar. Hey, Edgar, you think you should do anything about like the obvious, like cloud of supernatural shit that's all over everything, that's telling you like, go look for there's something weird with Elizabeth. There's something going on. Figure it out. No, he's not.
Nope, not going to worry about it. Doesn't matter.
He's busy.
Yep. Edgar gets a clean bill of health and also some more info on Elizabeth. The doctor basically says she's probably not ever going to come back from this particular bout of Alzheimer's, and even if she does, it'll be very temporary. But the doctor also knows for a fact that she doesn't draw, Matt, and she never drew.
Uh-huh.
So I guess that's beat number 2. Now we know for sure. It's, 2 makes a pattern.
Yeah, and this doctor is very correct about everything that he says.
Yep.
And he also keeps pushing pills on Edgar.
I wonder, like, it's 2008, right? So I don't think the opiates epidemic has like fully taken on public consciousness at this point. But maybe I mean, King did get like addicted to painkillers after his accident, right? Like that, like I don't know if we want to call it relapsed, but he did develop an addiction to those painkillers. And so perhaps this is his commentary on that like, Edgar says here when he says no, that he worked very, very hard to get off the hard stuff, which we know he did. And it's like, man, the doctors just keep pushing them on you, though. Hey, I'll write the script. Let me know. You need them?
Yeah. I get a really nice kickback. I mean, they work really well. Yeah, I mean, I think it probably just reflects his real experience. That's yeah.
Back home, Edgar completes Girl and Ship number 8, the last in the series, and a painting that he describes as, quote, fucking terrifying. He almost, Matt, puts the red picnic basket in the painting. He's like considering doing this strongly, but he's interrupted by Wireman calling him on the phone, and he decides that it doesn't need the picnic basket anyway.
Yeah, it's that'd be too much, right?
Yeah,
you get the feeling like he dodged a bullet here somehow.
Sure. I do like, this is one of those things, talking about the discussion question we're going to be hitting here in about half an hour. I want to know what a painting of a ship with a girl on it looks like that is fucking terrifying. Like, I want to be able to see that, and my mind's eye cannot create that image in my head.
Yeah, I agree. Like you're not actually the description of this painting specifically is pretty scanty. We're not entirely sure.
Yeah.
Like, well, like what about it is terrifying, right? Like,
Yeah, because the Girl in Ship series, all we've kind of been told specifically is that, you know, there's a girl in a rowboat that looks quite a bit like his daughter. There's a ship in the distance, and the ship is slowly turning towards the I guess the frame, to where we're seeing more and more of the name of the ship. And that's really all we know about these paintings. He doesn't actually describe it very much. You're right.
yeah, right. He doesn't even particularly address the fact that it's strange to paint the same subject matter so many times. I guess it's
Yeah.
not. I guess it's not necessarily, but nor does he give a reason for why he's painting this particular subject matter.
Hmm.
It's unusual for him, is what I should say. He doesn't usually do that.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. So Wireman is calling because Elizabeth is starting to come out of one of her fugue states and is asking for Percy, one of her China dolls, the one without a face that she had him throw in the water. They think so, maybe, I don't know. Once again, we hear that line that the table is leaking, and once again, we just don't know what any of this means at all.
I don't really think that this makes sense, but I previously thought that maybe like the water table is leaking, like there's something buried here that's now like seeping out into the sea. I don't actually think that's right, but I kind of like the imagery of it, so I said it.
Sure, yeah, it's fun. No, I like it.
Cool.
We do get confirmation from Wireman that Elizabeth has never drawn or painted, Matt. So here we have the as close to the source itself, Wireman, our third beat. In fact, we learn here that she told the exact same anecdote to everyone she talked to about those who don't teach, or those who can't play the sport, become a patron. And she says the same thing to everyone, almost as if it was a lie.
Yeah, right.
And I guess my question for you here is, this is a lot of work to go through in this story to confirm something for our character that we, the reader, already knew. So I'm wondering what your feeling on it is. Because, like, yeah, we hit this beat. Like, this is a major part of the chapter of him asking this question to multiple people, getting the same response, and then making a conclusion based off of it, but one that we knew already.
Yeah, I guess it just emphasizes her commitment to this idea that this is a terrible secret that she's thoroughly buried.
Yeah.
Because I don't remember her ever lying to Wireman. You know, like lying to Wireman seems like a pretty strong indicator. Like within this story, the idea that she would knowingly lie to Wireman, it's like, wow, okay, then this is this. She's even lying to a Katat member, so this is not trivial for her.
Yeah. So meanwhile, Edgar gets interviewed by the Associate Press, which makes him famous now, Matt. He's famous.
Yeah.
Hooray. And after finishing Girl in Ship 8, he seems like he's done painting for now. He's not going to paint anymore. So he's just going to walk and collect shells, and that's it.
Yeah, isn't that interesting? Like the creative, the muse, the creative force that's been possessing him. It's like it feels satisfied for now, for whatever reason.
Yep. All right. So I think of particular interest to me here, Matt, is Wireman's chat with Edgar about Elizabeth and her worsening state, and specifically how it reminds him of the poem "The Walrus and the Walrus," and "The Carpenter" by Lewis Carroll. I want to talk to you about this really interesting briefly, because it is really interesting. The Walrus and the Carpenter. That's a poem that you probably know, right? I feel like most people know this poem.
I mean, I've read it. I don't know it, but yeah.
The general gist of this is the Walrus and the Carpenter are walking along a beach. They see some oysters, and they say, "Hey, oysters, come on a walk with us. We're just going to have a nice walk." And a bunch of oysters follow them. And then they're like, "All right, we're just going to stay here and rest." And they're like, "Yay, hey, you guys want dinner?" And then they eat the oysters.
Right.
They eat all the oysters and they walk off.
Yeah, and they're really sad about it too. That's
yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, yeah. They're just like, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I have to do this.
Right.
It's really sad. I'm sorry. I sorry. It was really mean of me to trick you, like I've tricked you, but
Yeah.
I'm still gonna eat you." Yeah. I mean, it's a poem that's, I guess, kind of about like greed and excess and power.
Yeah.
These are just the way they influence. Like the one thing that when I was rereading the poem, I thought that was really interesting is that the scene setting is that the sun is shining. It's shining with all its might, and this was odd because it was the middle of the night.
Uh-huh.
So like this idea that the sun shouldn't be here right now, but the sun is exerting its power on the world, even though it shouldn't,
Mhm.
and ignoring the wants and needs of the moon, who is upset
Yeah.
because she's like, "Hey, sun, you're not supposed to be here." And so that reflects also to the walrus and their treatment, and the carpenter and their treatment of the oysters, which they don't care about. And so, kind of bringing this all back to Duma Key, it's interesting that we're talking about this. I think the way Wireman frames this is that he thinks that Elizabeth is being led off by the walrus and the carpenter here.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you're right. I think you're right. I mean, I think there's a lot more symbolism to the walrus and the carpenter, but I
Yeah,
think that's basically the gist of what we're getting at. Yeah.
yeah, and this idea that like I think one of the things he says is I hope like that her brain has been let off by the walrus and the carpenter, and all that remains here is this husk. And like that sometimes he wishes that was the case because it makes him feel better. But like I don't know, it's just one line. He's like, but Wireman, you know what happens to the oysters, right? Like they're eaten. But I like this as like this power comes and just like swoops up us being Elizabeth in this case, and Edgar in a certain way. This power comes, it swoops you up, it leads you away, it entices you. It says, "Oh, look at this beach, this beautiful beach. Let's go walk along the beach and let's sit down here." And suddenly it's eating you, and you didn't expect it.
Yeah. It is a funny. I guess it didn't even consciously occur to me that the walrus and the carpenter are literally on a beach,
Yep.
which is also kind of where they are.
And they're on a beach, and they're really mad that there's so much sand on the beach.
Yeah, yeah. It's
They cry about it. They wept like anything to see such quantities of sand. If there were only cleared away, they said it would be grand.
yeah. That's
What a weird poem. I love it. It's such a weird poem.
yeah. I'm sure there's some deep meaning to all of it. I don't know what it is though.
I really do think like greed, entitlement. These are things that are very much at play here.
I mean, I thought there was some religious subtext to it, but
probably.
I'm not sure what exactly.
All right. So after the walrus and the carpenter, we learn that Wireman has been doing a little research on Eastlake and has some information to share with Edgar. The first thing we learn is that Heron's Roost, that Elizabeth currently resides in, was not the original. That there was a first one, a bigger one, and that one is situated, Matt, in perhaps the middle of the overgrown section of the island, and that it's probably still just standing there, rotting and wasting away.
Yeah, I mean, if it's not the water table, and if it's a real physical table, then that's totally where the table is that is leaking.
Mm-hmm. The new one was built when they returned to the Key, the East Lakes at least. I love as Edgar compares the two houses, like he sees the difference. One's bigger, one's a little bit smaller, but he notices that the original was much more open and inviting, but this one is much more guarded. Walls, gates, insular versus the open inviting. And I think that reflects the mood of the people that live there at the time. They suffer this horrible tragedy and flee. They eventually come back, but they're much more insular and protected this time around.
Yeah, and maybe they know that there's something worth fearing out there.
Yeah, maybe they do. They go on to look at pictures of the family. One in 1925. This is a copy of the big photo that Edgar saw on the second floor. And another in 1927. This is after the Alice hurricane and the treasure discovery we've been reading about in the How to Draw a Picture sections. I love the detail, Matt, that this isn't like actual treasure in any way. It's just like bits and bobs of old knickknacks. Interesting, yes. Exciting, sure, but it's not valuable in any way. It's just like it's valuable to Elizabeth's father as a thing to do, right?
Yeah, it's hardly even worth the fuss we make over it. It's like, yeah, they just found some crap in the ocean. That happens all the time.
Yeah.
But it seems to draw attention, and then I mean I think the gist of it is we get these figurines, and there's some magical significance to
Sure.
either
Yeah.
the figurines or possibly something else that gets found in the
Mhm.
wreckage.
One thing that really jumped out to me, Matt, was Edgar's observation of Daddy Eastlake and his expanding waistline. Like there's a lot of talk about how his diving suit clearly doesn't fit him anymore, and how this means a few things. Actually, I like this line here: the smiling middle daughters, the smiling daddy who was soon going to have to buy himself a new bathing costume. And I suddenly decided he hadn't been sleeping with a nanny. No, even a mistress would have told him he couldn't have the newspaper photo of himself taken in that old thing. She would have found a tactful reason, but the real one was right in front of me. After all these years, even with less than perfect vision in my right eye, I could see it. He was too fat. Only he didn't see it, and his daughters didn't see it either. Loving eyes did not see. I love that last line. Loving eyes did not see.
Yeah. Well, I adore that too for two reasons. Number one, it's been pointed out that Edgar's power is seeing,
Mhm.
more so than it is painting, and maybe there's something that Edgar is not seeing because he loves someone.
Yeah.
Unclear who exactly, but there's someone that he loves too much to see some uh, terrible thing, some flaw, some danger. So I love it for that. And actually, I said two things. That's the only thing. That's
No, but I like that, because I do think that is something we're setting up. And I think one of the things that we could possibly also infer from this is there was some stuff going on with Elizabeth when she was a kid, right? Like that she's being possessed by this thing, right?
right.
And did her father notice? Oh, maybe not. Maybe he didn't notice. Why? Because loving eyes did not see. That she couldn't see the problem in her father's expanding waistline, and he couldn't see the problem in what was happening with her. And the way love blinds you to
Yeah.
these things sometimes.
Well, I remembered the second part I was going to say, which is that maybe Edgar's own daughter, Ilsa, loves him too much to see the flaws that were evident with him when he was, younger before his accident,
Yeah, could be. Could be.
and
I
maybe
like that.
that's why she was his favorite, even.
Yeah, yeah, maybe. This is also like the kind of I guess the narrative reason for why we're doing this, Matt, and we're focusing on how fat this guy is now, since it just keeps being brought up again and again and again. It is really a kind of interesting way of connecting dots, where Edgar reasons that Daddy Eastlake had given up on diving, because the suit he has now, that he wears now, doesn't fit him anymore. So he was not actively diving, which means that this treasure he discovered was not done accidentally on his like daily investigation of the water, but at the direction of Elizabeth, which again is a thing that we, the reader, already knew. But the characters hadn't put together yet. But this is a chain of events that allows Edgar to come to that realization in the novel. I think it's interesting how I think it's clever how King connects the dots there. Like once again, Edgar is really focusing on this diving costume that's just too big, and
Yeah.
like I don't know. At first, I was like, "Why are you focusing on this so much? Who cares if the guy's a little fat? I don't care." And then there's a reason for it, right?
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's the seeing again. He notices things other people don't know. And yeah, and then there ends up being he's like a bit of a detective, but
Yeah,
I had to be held by the hand and led to the conclusion though. I was like you're saying, I was like, I don't what who cares about the bathing suit?
yeah, yeah. But based on the pictures and the story of the treasures, they make an assumption that the two girls that drowned must have wandered down to the beach by themselves one time to play. Maybe they saw something glint in the sand out in the beach, so they went a little too far into the water, got sucked up into the riptide, and drowned. A nice enough story, but as we will see, a false one, right?
Yep, it's actually much worse.
And then we get this line. I want to talk to you about this. There's a story here, muchacho, and I suppose it's marginally more interesting than a little girl swallowing a marble. But a tragedy is a tragedy, and at the bottom, all tragedies are stupid. Give me a choice, and I'll take A Midsummer Night's Dream over Hamlet every time. Any fool with steady hands and a working set of lungs can build up a house of cards and then blow it down. But it takes a genius to make people laugh.
So this book's going to be a comedy then?
Is this a comment? Like, once again, depiction does not equal endorsement, right? This is just because Wireman says this in a Stephen King book does not mean Stephen King believes this, right?
Well, yeah, because clearly a lot of King's books are tragedies to some degree, right?
Mm-hmm.
So,
but tragedies are stupid. But that's that. I mean, I think that's part of the allure of a tragedy is like you are watching characters behave stupidly, and you are like, no, why, you fool, you idiot.
yeah, I think you're right. It's frustrating, and part of the frustration is like the active ingredient of the thing.
Yeah. The two are interrupted by news that Miss Eastlake has, at least for the time being, come out of her haze and is able to recognize Wireman, and more importantly to our scene here, Edgar.
Yeah, again, it seems like the theme of this week's reading is touching base with like every character in the book of any importance, and setting the table, the leaking table, perhaps.
Stop it
for what's going to come potentially soon.
Yeah, I agree. We are kind of perhaps. I mean, how far into this book are we now? I think we're over halfway, right? Yeah. So we're this is our fourth episode, and we're covering this in 7 episodes plus our overview. So we are over halfway through the book now, and I think we are starting to ramp things up to our conclusion. And so yeah, things are going to start breaking bad, we believe, and we're just checking in before we do that.
All right.
But the conversation here between Edgar and Elizabeth is so fucking good, Matt. Like I love Edgar looking at her and recognizing his own struggles in her and kind of willing her forward in a way that not even Wireman can fully understand. And it's heartbreaking because like what's happening here is we're almost wanting to force the conversation along as quickly as possible, because there is some important pieces of the mystery of Elizabeth and the mystery of Heron's Roost and the mystery of Duma Key that we're thinking perhaps Elizabeth is about to reveal to us here. And we're so excited about potentially getting that information, but also she's dying. And this is perhaps Wireman's final moment of lucidity with her. So we want to speed this along to the point, but we also want him to get to say goodbye. And it's this really interesting contradiction, and one that I believe Edgar feels as much as we the reader feel. Like that like I think she says I love you, Wireman, and he says I love you too, and Edgar's like, good for him. Like, he's like happy that he gets this moment, but also he's like, Elizabeth, please finish, you can do it, you can do it, you can do it, right?
Yeah it's beautiful. We the reader want to see these mysteries resolved. We want the answers to these questions, but it's actually more important to us in this moment to see Wireman happy. So we kind of don't mind that the scene takes its time. I like it.
Yeah. Elizabeth asks Edgar if he's painted the ship yet, which is such an ominous statement. I forget what the actual line of the text was. It's like, it's not like my stomach dropped, just that it ceased to exist or something like that.
Yeah.
Really, really great. She goes on to strongly suggest that he sell the ship pictures and seems relieved when he says he will. We know that later that night, Edgar goes to do just that, but decides at the last minute to hold back the final picture in the series, Girl and Ship number 8. That's that's fine.
That's probably a mistake, but
no,
we'll see.
And this is the line that we finished this chapter on. And why was it NFS? Not because it was genius, although I think it was. Not even because when I looked at it, it was, for me, like listening to the darkest part of my heart telling its tale. It was because I felt that something had let me live just to paint it, and that to sell it would be to deny my own life and all the pain I had undergone to reclaim it. Yeah, that.
But is this something good or bad?
That's the eternal question of this book, right? Is like, that feels ominous, right? And as you said, I think we're correctly picking up on the feeling that, when Elizabeth, a woman who has a lot more experience with this thing than Edgar does, says, sell the pictures, get them as far away from each other as possible and as far away from here as possible. It might still not be enough, but it'll do something, hopefully. And then he makes the decision at the last minute to hold one back. Yeah, we get this feeling of concern, but yeah, at the same time, like as him kind of patting himself on the back for all the hard work and pain he had gone through to get to this place, we want to feel good for him there. But
yeah,
right,
like he deserves a break, right? You don't want to You don't have to hold everything over him.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, our last section of the week, how to draw a picture 7. This one opens with, remember that seeing is believing puts the cart before the horse. Art is the concrete artifact of faith and expectation, the realization of a world that would otherwise be little more than a veil of pointless consciousness stretched over a gulf of mystery. And besides, if you don't believe what you see, who will believe your art?
Love it.
Love it so much.
Me too. Again, this is like the third one of these, at least the third this week, where I'm just like, okay, that's perfect.
Art is the concrete artifact of faith and expectation, the realization of a world that would otherwise be little more than a veil of pointless consciousness stretched over a gulf of mystery. I love that so much.
Me too. I want to print that out, frame it,
put on a mug.
Yeah.
Matt, this one breaks the mold though a little bit here. Like, so far we've been mostly telling the story of Elizabeth through these interludes, her ominous increasing in skill and the entity that's been inhabiting her and influencing her paintings to what we know will be certain disaster. But here we actually get to see one of those disasters, because here we're in the perspective of Lolo and Tessie, the two twins, as they're frantically running away from the big boy, a funny fanged frog that their sister Libet used to draw all the time. But this one jumped out of the pool and is real and is chasing them towards the beach.
Jesus Christ.
A definite escalation of the supernatural here, right? Where we've just been like, Edgar does weird things with painting, and now we're summoning beasts with our paintings.
Yeah, and it's, a monster. It's terrifying. Yeah. It's like guts are sloshing around, and
it's so gross.
It's interesting because the text doesn't quite tell us whether this thing is real, because it could be a sort of hallucination that's just scaring them and scares them into the water, and then they drown. So it's basically they did drown, but with extra steps. They drowned because the supernatural entity forced them to drown. In other words,
but they believe it's real, right?
Yeah.
Seeing is believing puts the cart before the horse. Believing is seeing. The chapter's arguing. So they believe it's real, and so they see it.
Yeah,
and so it is real.
Yeah.
So out in the water, they see that ship that you were talking about. They decide that the only hope is to swim towards it, even though one of them can't swim. Great decision making. The riptide takes them, however, and Lolo drowns. Tessie doesn't drown right away. She is taken towards the ship. Really, really emotional stuff here.
God, yeah, this really got me, like, worse than anything else in this book. The two little girls drowning. I was just like, okay, I need a break.
Yeah. So as they head towards the ship, we see that it transforms a little bit. And here Edgar says, here is a picture I did paint, not once, but again and again and again. The whiteness of the hull doesn't exactly disappear. It is sucked inward like blood fleeing the cheek of a terrified man. The ropes fray. The brightwork dulls. The glass in the windows of the aft cabin bursts outward. A junk heap clutter appears on the decking, rolling into existence from fore to aft. Except it was there all along. Tessie just didn't see it. Now she sees. Now she believes.
So this is perhaps the ship. This is the ship that sank or didn't sink. Sort of pointedly didn't sink and scattered the debris. When you mention a junk heap of clutter, it's like I also wonder if like this transformation isn't exactly the thing that is depicted in Girl with Ship 1 through 8. Like that's why 8 was terrifying, is because we're seeing the final form of the ship.
But don't you think he would have described that a bit more? Like, maybe I need to go back and read his description of Girl with Ship 8, but he just doesn't go into a lot of detail, I don't think.
I mean, the natural thing would have been to describe it, yes, but I think my loosely held theory is that this is the revelation of what is in Girl with Ship 8. Like that's he's doing a thing here, in other words.
Yeah, I looked it up as you were talking there, and no, it doesn't say anything about it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, looking at it with what I hoped was a dispassionate eye, I realized disturbing was probably the wrong word. That baby was fucking terrifying. Looking at it was like looking at a mind turned sideways.
Yeah. Oh,
But that's all it says.
we don't
Yeah.
quite know what that means visually speaking, right?
Yeah. They said there's room for a red picnic basket on it. I could add it, certainly not. But the damn thing was crammed with figures and details as it was. Always room for one more. But yeah, we don't actually see what any of those figures or details are. Yeah, it does feel like an intentional of avoiding of showing any detail of the painting.
And he says crammed with figures and details, and then here we see this description of junk heap clutter appears on the decking, rolling into existence from fore to aft. Like that's there's your details, right?
Yep. I like that. So a woman comes onto the deck of this ghost ship, and instead of helping, Tessie just kind of waves at her as she is pulled under by we're told the hand of her sister, because believing is not just seeing, Matt. Believing is also feeling. Any artist will tell you so.
Yep.
Dun dun dun.
Terrifying. Love it.
Yeah. So ghosts can't hurt you unless you believe they can.
Yeah, which if you're an artist, you will. So.
Uh-oh.
Yep.
Good thing we don't know any of them.
No.
All right, that's gonna do it. Man, I loved those chapters so much. This is great. I'm so excited for where the book goes from here, Matt. Just so you know, the next chapter is titled "The Show," so you can probably figure out what's gonna happen during that one.
It's probably gonna be some kind of party.
So yeah, next week we will be reading chapters 13 and 14. I think this is our shortest little. I think this one's only 60 pages this week, so taking it a little easy on you.
Okay, all right, I'll take it.
Yeah, so we will get to chapters 13 and 14, and I think there's one more how to draw a picture smashed between those next week, so we'll get another one of those. But for now, we have some discussion questions to answer. What was our question last week, Matt?
Wireman goes west and girl with ship are described in such beautiful, exquisite detail that I can't help but want to see what these finished products actually look like. Are there any other incredibly descriptive things in written stories that you would wish you could see with your own eyes? Karena 2020 says, the number one thing I'd want to see in real life described in books is pretty obvious, and that is the Dark Tower. I have a picture in my head of the tower, the field of roses, the path that winds down to the tower, everything. This picture has been in my head since I first read the description for the first time in 2004. This series is something I waited my whole life for King to finish, ever since I read The Gunslinger in the late 70s. So this would be an emotional thing to see it in real life for me.
Well, I've got some good news for you, because they did that already. You just head to, I don't know what streaming service, Hulu. Head to Hulu, and you can watch The Dark Tower, which features the Dark Tower.
God, that's so cruel.
I know. I'm so sorry.
I mean, but I like the sentiment here, because there's a bunch, you of course you can find artist depictions of the Dark Tower, but what Karena is, I think saying is, no, I want the picture I have in my head, and I totally get that, right? I totally get, like, you see an adaptation of a thing and you're like, that was really cool. I really admired the vision, but it's not what I have in my head. I want to see what I have in my head. I get that.
Yeah. On top of the many bad things that movie did, their depiction of the tower itself was also bad.
It was.
I did not like it.
Yep.
Guilty Spark 113 says, I would want to see Blaine the Mono and the station where he was at. Blaine, because of the many interesting things it did while traveling, turning the walls invisible so everyone could see what and where they were passing, the speed at which it traveled, and its split personality. I would have loved to see the station, because the way Mr. King described it, it sounds like a massive structure that would blow someone's mind. Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah, there were like cool statues and stuff in the station too, and giant pink train. Yeah, sure, love it.
And that whole sequence on Blaine is just a great sequence, and seeing that all played out for us would be really cool.
Totally agree. Guilty Spark 113. No, wait, that's you.
No, just did that.
Pear Jane says, I really want to see the house in Piranesi. I have an extraordinarily vivid mental image: white marbled floor and walls and floor, seawater depositing shells and seaweed on the staircases, the white marble statues positioned throughout the space. On the one hand, I would love to see a version of it that's either mostly practical effects or animated. A CGI version would deplete the soul of the place. On the other hand, I would be a little sad to see any rendering that would alter the abstract, benevolent goddess spirit of what I hold in my mind.
Well, as we said on book club on Friday night, Piranesi is the correct answer to any question. So
We did.
yes,
That's very very clever then, Pear Jane. Yeah, no, I like this because there's I think part of what this answer admits to is that like there are some things that you want to see, but you know that seeing it would inevitably rob it of its ethereal sort of perfection in your mind.
yeah.
And I feel like the house, I feel exactly this way where I'm like, I would love to see an image of this, but also I totally, absolutely know that no image would do justice to what I have in my mind. And so do I really want to see an image of it after all?
Yeah, it's like Karina and her image of Dark Tower, right? Like
Yeah.
it's just it's the contradiction of man.
Yeah.
They're like, yeah, we want to see these things, but on some level know that the image of it could never match how we see it in our head. Yeah.
Yep.
All right. Next we have Friedlock68, who says, after reading Neil Young's autobiography, I would love to see the unreleased film Human Highway starring Young with Devo as the supporting cast and produced by Dennis Hopper and Dean Stockwell. It's probably not very good. So Friedlock took the question a little bit differently, but something that was created, but that will never see the light of day.
Yeah, that's a fun answer, even though I have no idea what the heck you're talking about there.
Yeah.
No, that's that'd probably be great. It'd probably be amazing. Good answer.
I want to see Coyote versus Acme or whatever the Warner Brothers film that they just canceled.
Is this a recent thing?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I didn't know about this.
Yeah, I remember when they just like wrote off the Batgirl movie for tax purposes.
Right.
Well, they did it again with this movie. Only the difference this time is that the test screenings of Coyote versus Acme were actually super positive. Like their excuse for Batgirl was like they did test screenings and they basically determined the movie was unwatchable and they just wouldn't be worth the time and money it would take to make it better. But like every test screening of Coyote versus Acme was incredibly positive and like excited about the film, and then they just were like, nah.
What a world. What a
cheaper
world.
It's cheaper to just kill this movie and write it off than it is to try to release it.
I keep being shocked that people don't leak versions of these things that are obviously, obviously they didn't delete it. Obviously it's somewhere. So you would think the creators would have, I don't know, whatever.
Yeah.
All right. Aqua Lungfish says, there may be something wrong with me, but I find myself fascinated by the things that are so indescribable that they drive people to madness. I want to see the lost film in cigarette burns that drove an entire theater to kill each other. I want to see the footage of the previous crew in Event Horizon. Side note, We're Leaving is the best comedic delivery of a line in any horror movie ever.
Correct.
I want to see the impossibly massive great halls of the Navidson house in House of Leaves. Most of all, I want to see the city in At the Mountains of Madness. The term non-Euclidean geometry was endlessly evocative even before I had any idea what it meant. Lovecraft, love him or hate him, and certainly had a lot of things to hate about him, had a knack for describing impossible things without actually describing them. I think that's the real power of the written medium over any visual one. If you know what you're doing, you can give people a feeling you want them to feel, and they can fill in the details of what is causing that feeling themselves. Still, though, I'll never stop being sad that we didn't get the Del Toro Mountains of Madness movie.
Me too.
Yeah. It's interesting. I'm going to just mention here that, like, there have been 2 film Dune adaptations and a TV series Dune adaptation, and like Dune is the perfect thing for this, the perfect example of this, because Frank Herbert doesn't describe shit ever. Like you never get like a visual description of what anything looks like in those books, and that's actually why like all these different adaptations can do different things. They all have the worms look different. They all have the still suits look different. They have the ornithopters. Everything about the aesthetic looks totally different between movies, and it's because he doesn't specify it. He just he tells you how to feel, and then you paint these pictures in your head, and you don't even realize that he hasn't described it. You just fill it in, and that's kind of interesting, right?
Yeah, I mean, I really like that the common trend amongst these answers so far has been, I want to see the unseeable, the indescribable, right? Yeah. Like the things that like we can get away with speaking of them only in words because we don't have to actually find a way to visually show it to your eyeballs. But those are the things I want to see,
right?
And I totally get that because I do too. Like the Navidson house answer is perfect because yeah, I would love to see that. I don't know how I could possibly, but yeah.
There's something remarkable about Dali specifically for me, where his paintings have this quality of them where I'm like, that's it. That's the impossible thing. Mm-hmm. That's the impossible thing that no one could have ever painted, but here it is. You know, that's why I love Dali.
That's great. Love it. Baby Can You Dig Your Sam says, for me, it's probably the dreaming from Sandman, especially the Library of Dreams. There was, of course, artwork depicting what it would look like, but I want to curl up with a book of that library and read my heart out. I imagine it to be the libraries against which all other libraries would be judged. Cozy and beautiful fireplaces, plush deep couches, tall wheeled ladders, perfect lighting, both natural and enchanted lights, of course, the perfect room temperature, a hot beverage mug that magically refills itself, and the glorious smell of 1,000 books. All the books from all the other levels of the tower. My heart soars just thinking of it. Oh man, so Sam doesn't want to just see it. She wants to live in it.
Yeah, that's sure, I'd love that too. I'd love to live in Rivendell. That was it. If that's an option, then that's my answer. Rivendell, and I will live there.
How did you feel about Peter Jackson's Rivendell?
I loved all of the art in those movies so much, and honestly, probably was better than whatever I had imagined. Like they did not, they spared no expense when it came to the sort of artistic realization of those different ideas in that movie.
One of these days, I'm gonna get you to say something negative about the Lord of the Rings.
No, you're not. I mean, what did you think? Were you let down by Rivendell?
To be entirely honest with you, I did not read those books until after I saw the movies. So
many such cases.
No, it was not. Yeah. It was very pretty.
Yeah, I like it. Cool. Silent Constant 2114 says, slightly adjacent answer here. I'd really like to hear a cover album of Baby Can You Dig Your Man? Here are some artists: Huey Lewis, Elton John, Saul Williams, Radiohead, Van Halen, Vampire Weekend, Journey, Billie Eilish, Fleet Foxes, Billy Joel, Pussifer, King Crimson, Chris Cornell. Fuck yes.
Billie Eilish's Baby Can You Dig Your Man? I don't know why that one jumped out to me.
But I would, yes. Pussifer and Billie Eilish and Elton John and Radiohead. Those are the ones on my like loop that I just listen to over and over.
Van Halen would be wild.
Yeah.
This is cool. I like this.
This is a really fun idea. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Next we have Snarking, who says, I have aphantasia, so my brain does not make mental images. There's only black when I close my eyes. Sadly, I only realized this was a thing a couple of years ago, so I always thought that mental pictures, mind eye, close your eyes and picture a beach, etc., were figures of speech. Imagine my shock and chagrin when I realized that people could actually see pictures, and when a character in a movie didn't look the way I pictured him in my head, it was because they had an actual picture of the character in their head. To me, being able to visualize would be like having a superpower, and I would never get a damn thing done because I would spend all day watching my brain make pictures. So what would I most like to see? Literally anything, my friends. Literally anything.
Well, Snarking, I know there's a guy on Twitter who claims to be able to teach people to not have aphantasia. So maybe I can find this link and put it somewhere for you, or reply to your comment perhaps with the link.
I would be very interested if that is true, because I don't think I have it quite as strongly as Snarking does, but you and I have talked about this before, where I tend to see things more in uh emotional, like, color. I don't even know how to describe it. Like,
Yeah.
there's an emotional, like, eh, it's not that I'm not seeing a face, but I'm not seeing, like, a lot of detail of a face. Like, when like
Mhm.
there's it's
Yeah.
just really hard to describe
Sure.
these things. But
I think everybody has their own idiosyncratic imagination space, which may or may not include a visual component.
mhm.
But yeah, I'll link you the thing as well, and then you can tell me what you
Sure.
think. Yeah.
All right.
Rummel Boxer 89 says, "Long-time listener, second-time answerer here. Now I've heard there was a secret chord that David played, and it pleased the Lord. Every time I hear Hallelujah or sing it to my son as a lullaby, I wonder about that secret chord." Especially since there are only 12 tones on the scale, and the fact that virtually any chord in progression has been made somewhere in musical history, the thought of something never heard before is astounding, and sorry, and sounding so divine it could please God Himself is intriguing. Um, I kind of thought there was a joke in the song, being that like it's just the chord that's being played as like the root of the song, but maybe I'm wrong about that.
Is that like Tenacious D's tribute?
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe. I don't know. I've never really thought about the lyrics to that song in any kind of serious way.
Yeah, I mean you're right that there's only so many chords, so
Mhm.
just try all of them.
Yeah. Last but not least, we have Don Zeste, who says, "Although not visual, I've always wanted Turkish delight from The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. Although the real things is not at all what I want. In a mind as a kid, it was some impossibly texture and flavor combination of sweet, savory, chocolatey, smooth, crunchy, melty, marshmallowy, etc. As an adult, the last time that happened was watching the movie Chef. The scene where they open the smoker and start tearing off pork for a Cuban sandwich. I get ravenous." Yeah,
Making me
Chef is
hungry.
just Favreau, like, having an excuse to eat a lot of delicious food.
This reminds me of the scene in Hook, when they imagine all of the food and it appears and they eat it. And as a child, I just really wanted to eat all that food
Yeah.
with them.
I think it is a rite of passage for all young people to read about Turkish delight
Uh-huh.
in The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, then get real Turkish delight and be just incredibly disappointed.
Yeah, I
The way it's described in that book makes it seem like the most delicious
I
thing ever conceived by man.
yeah. I mean, he betrays his family for Turkish delight. it's
and
it's
then
so good.
and then you get it and it's like, this
Wow,
sucks.
this makes me think even less of him now.
Like, actually, like, the principal problem with The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe movie was that it just showed us what real Turkish delight looks like, and
Uh-huh.
I'm like, oh, I don't believe anyone would be bad
Yeah,
for that.
this is a plot
That looks
hole.
bad.
C.S.
Somewhere out there,
Lewis.
there's someone that, like, fucking loves Turkish delight. They're gonna be really mad at us, but this is Greta Gerwig's big problem. She's got to figure out in her Narnia adaptation, how do we accurately depict Turkish delight as it is portrayed in the novel?
Yeah, it's not going to be anything like real Turkish delight. Yeah,
It has to be, because yeah,
it's going to be
it's not
Don
good.
Zest's version of Turkish delight.
I hope so. All right, y'all. Thank you so much. Those were great answers. That was really fun. I think this is a really fun exercise because, yeah, like, we saw different people's interpretation of, like, what visualize or experience would be, right? And I think it's really cool. It's really cool.
Yeah, I enjoyed that. I it really made me think, actually. So that was really fun.
Yeah, I'm always kind of, like, perpetually fascinated by the concept of adaptation, and, like, like, I feel like we do this thing generally where we, like, always want the things we love to be adapted into some other medium. Like a good Dark Tower series is something that I've wanted forever, and I know I'm not the only one in that. And I've always, like, been curious about the why of it all. Like, why do we want this so much? Why do we want to be able to see these things? Why is it so important to us to experience these things in other formats? And it's just because it's a different way of experiencing it ultimately. And I
Yeah,
think it's really cool.
I think it also has to do with sharing it with other people. Like,
Sure, yeah.
one reason I was excited about the Wheel of Time adaptation is I was like, I know there's people who will never read The Wheel of Time. I don't even know if they should read The Wheel of Time, but they'll watch the show and then I can talk about The Wheel of Time with them, and I'll get to share this with them. Even though I have mixed feelings about it, I'll get to share this with them.
I've been thinking about this a lot with the Avatar adaptation that just came out on Netflix, the live action adaptation, and it's fine. I've watched like 4 episodes. It's fine, but it's like, why did we make this thing?
Yeah, right.
Is the question I kept asking myself. And like the old version of that question, and the answer to that question was, well, cartoons are for children, and people take live action things much more seriously than cartoon things. And so to get it broader appeal, we have to remake it in a way that people will actually watch it. And I think the interesting thing about Avatar, and perhaps culture in general, is I think that concept is going away slowly.
Yeah.
That a cartoon thing needs to be made live action to be more legitimate. I think that idea is going away with like the rise in appreciation of animation as its own art form, and I just feel like every year I think that gets a little bit less and less true, that to have any hope of serious consideration, an animated thing needs to be remade in live action.
Yeah, especially Avatar: The Last Airbender, which is one of the few perfect things in the world, and so like any adaptation is going to just be less good, right?
Yeah. That Shyamalan one, though, was pretty good.
It was pretty solid.
All right, Matt, what is our question for our audience for next week?
Edgar absolutely kills it at the lecture this week. What are some of your favorite moments of a character absolutely killing at some sort of live presentation or performance?
I just realized with the way I worded that, someone is going to pick an answer that's like someone murdering people while performing or something.
Yeah. I already have an answer in my mind, actually.
That's great. I think this is going to be fun. I really enjoy these sequences and stories where, like, you know, someone is just like really good at just presenting. Like I always get totally hooked by that kind of stuff.
Me too.
It's really fun.
Yeah.
All right, folks, that is it for us this week. As we said, next week we will continue Duma Key with chapters 13 through 14. We have the show, and then whatever follows that, which, you know, there's still a few hundred pages left in this book, Matt. So the show is not going to be the climax. It's going to come after.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I feel like I was suggesting that, like, we're almost to the climax, and like I know that can't be true. So I don't know how things are going to go, but in any case, we will have a good conversation regardless. So remember, you can reach us via email at kingslingerspod@gmail.com, over on x.com at kingslingerspod, or over on the subreddit at reddit.com/r/doofmedia.
If you're not already subscribed to Kingslingers, we strongly recommend you do so. We are leaving Duma Key behind in just a few short weeks and moving on to another new book, so you don't want to miss it. You don't want to miss that transition. So please subscribe. We are on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, we're on YouTube. I think anywhere else, I don't know. Are there any other platforms left? I feel like they're dropping like flies.
They're cannibalizing each other. There's just going to be one left.
Yep.
If you like Kingslingers and you want to support us, then please consider donating to our Patreon at patreon.com/doofmedia. There you'll be able to catch our latest episode of Castle Talk, where we talk about the television series based on the fictional town of Castle Rock, the setting of so many Stephen King stories. That episode dropped earlier this week, and we had a fun time talking about those episodes.
Well, I was going to drop it next week, but I guess I have to drop it this week.
It dropped sometime around the time of this episode.
It's supposed to be the second Wednesday, Matt. The second Wednesday.
I know, damn it. Fucked up.
Of course, if you cannot afford to join us on Patreon, that is absolutely okay. You can help us out by sharing this podcast, and of course, by leaving us a rating and a review. This week's review comes from Dan W., who gives us 5 stars and says, "Really great. I read the Dark Tower series over 20 years ago, and most of Stephen King's other works as well. I've stepped away for a long time, and I don't know why, but this show is recommended, and I remembered, oh, I love The Dark Tower. I listened to the first episode and it was awesome. It brought me right back to the world, and these guys point out a lot of stuff that I subconsciously picked up on, but never actually openly thought about or discussed in terms of themes and tropes and wonderful storytelling. Oh, Dan, that was very nice. Thank you. I'm glad you're back. Glad you're back to the tower. It always calls you again.
Yeah.
Can't resist it.
And I like that description of what we're doing, which is essentially trying our best to articulate the experience of reading, which everyone essentially shares, but we don't usually slow down and say it out loud, right?
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. Thanks, Dan, and thanks to everyone else who continues to leave those rating and reviews. They do help us. They honestly do. And we've got a bunch of them now. We're up to like 550 something, Matt, which is insane. Absolutely insane.
Jesus.
All right, folks, we will see you here back next week for a couple more chapters of Duma Key. Oh, it's getting, I can't say it's getting good because it's good. It's there. We're at the good, and it's only gonna get gooder.
I'm loving it. Or is it bad?
Oh, so gothic.
So gothic.
All right, folks. Long days and pleasant nights.
And may you have twice the number.